Welcome to Dark Speak, where secrets never sleep, and the darkness always has something to say. Real-life midnight terror in the heat of summer. My name is Tran Min Kwan. This happened many years ago, and I had almost forgotten about it until a memory suddenly came flooding back. That summer, I was 17, working the night shift at a small pizza shop on the remote outskirts of Nam Hoa town, where I grew up. I didn't like the job, but when my pocket was empty and my parents would be angry enough to punish me if they found out I was unemployed, there was no point in complaining. It was the kind of job you had to take, because there were no other places hiring. Each shift was slow, the uniform was always uncomfortably damp, and the old delivery car could barely climb the small slopes. Luckily, I didn't have to use my own car, but that didn't make it any better. Oh, and the pizza there was terrible. So bad, in fact, that I couldn't understand why people still ordered it. If it weren't for the online ordering system and the quiet atmosphere in the cafe, we probably wouldn't have gotten a single order. Honestly, it's the only thing that reminds me of home, and that's saying a lot. The only good thing about the place is that, either because the pizza is so bad or because it's so far from the center, the orders are extremely few. Most evenings, the only noise is the creaking of the ventilation fan and the flickering fluorescent lights on the ceiling. I won't bore you with the mundane details of the shift. It's just a pizza place. You can imagine the rest. But that night was different. I was putting drinks in the fridge when the tablet screen lit up with a new order, large sausage pizza with olives. I remember it clearly because I've never had olives. The address is in a remote area, out of delivery range. I was about to decline as usual, but before I could press cancel, the shift manager, a 30-something guy named Pham Duay Loy, who had been hunched over his laptop in the back room all day, looked up and told me to go ahead because there hadn't been a delivery in over an hour. I didn't argue. When the pizza was ready, I punched in the address on my phone and picked up the box. At least the trip would kill about 40 minutes. As I was walking out the door, I caught sight of the Duay Loy delivery slip pinned to the box. It read, "Park on the street behind the house. Walk through the backyard. Knock on the back door only." The words made me pause for a moment, but in my impulsive 17-year-old mind, I quickly came up with a few plausible excuses. Maybe they didn't want to wake the elderly or children. Maybe the front door was being repaired. Or maybe they just wanted to hide the order from someone in the house. All were possible, so I decided to go anyway. But as soon as I stepped out of the bar, I immediately sensed something was different. The night was hot and thick, like walking through a pot of hot soup. The air was so humid and still that everything seemed frozen in an invisible layer of jelly. And there was a smell that made me shiver, a rancid, sour smell, like a mixture of old plastic and damp earth baked in the summer sun. It clung to every breath, seeping deep into my chest. I hated it more than anything, but knew that on summer nights like this, it was unavoidable. The smell of old plastic and sun-baked earth hung in the air. It was exactly what was outside. I hated it more than anything, but on a stifling summer night like this, it was almost unavoidable. I rolled down the window, endured it for about 2 minutes before giving up and turning on the air conditioning. The delivery address wasn't toward the center town, but the opposite. Even though Nam Hoa Pizza was in the middle of nowhere, the GPS said it would only be a 25-minute drive, but the long, quiet road made it seem like it would drag on. There weren't any houses along the way, but the farther I got, the fewer lights and roofs there were. When I finally arrived, I found myself entering the back of an unfamiliar house. The GPS led me down a narrow alleyway, running parallel to a series of dark backyards. There were no street lights, no porch light. Everything was pitch black. I slowed down, checking the house number again, because the scene before me looked completely deserted. No lights inside, no cars parked in the driveway. The backyard was slanted. The grass was knee-high. The wooden fence was crooked, and the gate was wide open. Following the note on the delivery note, I parked close to the gravel curb, pizza box in hand, flashlight in hand to keep from tripping. The small ramp leading up to the back door came into view, an old whitewashed wooden door, topped with a tiny pane of glass covered by a thin silver gray curtain, frayed at the edges. I knocked, waited, no answer. I knocked a second time, thinking of Due Loy's frowning face if I returned empty-handed. No response. Just as I was about to knock a third time, I saw the curtain twitch, just a little, as if a finger had touched it, so fast that if I hadn't been staring, I might have missed it. I stood still for a few seconds, waiting for the door to open. Instead, headlights flashed in the distance, and two unmarked cars slid slowly down the side street behind where I parked. My first thought was that I was about to be arrested for trespassing or something. The front door opened, and a man got out. In the glare of the second car's headlights, I could see his muscular build. He held out his hand, beckoning me closer. Thinking it might be the homeowner or the pizza orderer, I stepped out onto the gravel and approached. As I got closer, I saw that he was holding a badge. He was a police officer, but he wasn't wearing a uniform, just a dark shirt and jeans. In a low voice, he told me to get back in the car and wait there. No words. I backed up, climbed into the car, put the pizza box on the seat, and looked out the window. That's when I realized we weren't alone. At least 5 more cops were milling around the house, flashlights flickering among the trees. No one said a word. No one knocked on the door. One of them went to the back door, the one I had just knocked on, and tried the handle. Finding it locked, he nodded to a fellow cop, then backed away. The tension was palpable. I had the feeling I was witnessing something I absolutely shouldn't be seeing, and I knew it was. Finally, the cop from earlier returned and sat down by my window. I rolled down the window, and the uniformed man approached, his eyes glancing at the box of cookies on the passenger seat. He sighed, his voice vague, deliberately avoiding revealing too much. Unlike someone acting, he seemed to be weighing his words. He told me that there was a special investigation going on in the building up ahead, and that he and several of his teammates were secretly monitoring it. He apologized for taking so long to intervene, explaining that I had arrived just as they were changing their hiding spots. I offered to show him the order information. He nodded. When I opened the delivery app, I saw that the information was really not helpful, just a phone number, an address, and a name, Vance. The cop wrote down the number, then sternly told me to leave immediately. I looked annoyed, saying that the boss would be angry if I brought the cookies back, but he just shrugged and repeated the order. With no other choice, I turned around and drove away, so frustrated that I didn't even finish the long drive. It wasn't until I got closer to home that I finally understood. If it hadn't been for that intervention, something terrible might have happened to me. The more I thought about it, the more I believed that the presence of the police was the only reason why that door would never open. But why would someone order a cake while being watched? Maybe the people in the house didn't know, or maybe they knew, but I was just a decoy to check if the surveillance force was still there or had left. The curtain swayed, the silence was oppressive, and that moment, I don't know, I also knew that I would never get an explanation. This incident would have been forgotten if an old high school friend hadn't accidentally brought it up last week. At first I couldn't even remember it, but now those vague images haunt me. Maybe I should bury it, but before this memory disappears, I want to tell here. It was last summer. I was 40, married, and had 2 sons, Darren, 7, Micah, 5. I worked in insurance, a steady but boring job. A few years earlier, my father had died after a long battle with cancer, leaving behind a small beach house in Seabarrow, a place I had never visited while he was alive, since he rented it out year-round. The house wasn't big, but it was just a block from the promenade, and it had a back balcony that looked out onto the ocean. Since his death, my family had come here every summer, making it a little tradition. My husband and I enjoyed the peace, and the kids were crazy about the beach, the bikes, and exploring the town. It was a Wednesday night, mid-July. After a long day of sunbathing, the kids were fast asleep by 9:30. My wife and I sat on the back balcony, playing cards and sipping wine. Suddenly, Darren came out, looking nervous. He said there was a constant scratching sound in the room, which kept him awake. I glanced at my wife, put down my glass, and told my son to lead the way. The house was old. I thought it might just be the wind or the wood structure expanding and contracting. Micah slept in another room, so I didn't wake him up. We walked into Darren's room. He pointed to the wall near the bed, signaling me to be quiet. I stood still for a moment, not hearing anything at first. But after about 20 seconds, I began to notice it, a very light scratching sound, just as he had described. I pressed my ear to the wall. The sound didn't sound like a mouse or any other animal crawling on the beams. It was coming from inside the wall, very close to the floor, and then I heard breathing. Not wind, not animal. It was a slow, deep, heavy breathing of a human. A chill ran down my spine. I jumped back, letting out a disjointed gasp of panic that I couldn't contain. And then, I swear I'm not exaggerating, a hoarse, fierce scream rang out from deep inside the wall, like the sound of something that didn't belong to this world. A chill ran down my spine, making me scream instinctively. Without thinking, I grabbed Kwong Dewey's hand tightly, pulling him out of the room. We ran as fast as we could down the hallway to find Min An's room, my youngest son, who was still sleeping soundly, as if he didn't know. I didn't let him open his eyes, just picked him up and ran. At that moment, there was only one thought in my head. I had to go upstairs where my wife was. When I reached the foot of the stairs, I shouted her name, but at that moment, another scream rang out, this time closer, right behind me. I turned around and saw a man covered in dust, his eyes bloodshot, rushing straight towards us. I almost fell trying to climb the stairs with the kids in my arms, but I finally made it. Less than 2 seconds after I slammed the sliding glass door shut, he was pounding on it. The force was so strong, I thought the glass would shatter. He started scratching, screaming things no one should hear, and then smashing like a wild animal. I pressed my shoulder against the door, screaming for my wife to grab the kids and call the police. She pulled them away, covering her ears, while I stood in the way, blocking his mad gaze. He looked like he had lost all reason. His hands were covered in a mixture of dirt, maybe blood, and he smeared across the glass as he tried to get in. I don't know how long I held the door, a minute, maybe 5, but it felt like an eternity. He seemed to have endless strength, and I used all my strength to stop the door from flying open. There was only one determination in my mind: to protect my family, even if I had to face it head-on if the glass broke. Then heavy footsteps sounded from the side of the house. 2 policemen rushed in. One of them tackled him from behind. The other helped restrain him. Everything happened so quickly that I only had time to gasp for breath. That whole night was as blurry as a nightmare. After he was escorted into the car, I told the police everything. We checked the whole house together, and then I discovered a chilling truth. Under the house, there was a large space that I had never known. There was a secret entrance hidden under the back porch, leading to a dark hallway that ran around the foundation of the house, and from there to Kwong Dewey's room through a loose board in the wardrobe. I never looked closely when I inherited this house, nor did I fix it up. A few days later, a detective called. His voice was soft but heavy as lead. The man had been under the house for months. He had discovered the entrance during the low season and had quietly turned the darkness into his lair. That night, he had decided to strike, believing that my family had invaded his new territory. During that time, he had stolen food from our house and even the neighbor's trash. We didn't go back for the rest of the summer, not because we were afraid of a repeat, but because of the trauma and loss. I hired someone to seal the entire underground entrance. Only when that was done did I finally breathe a sigh of relief. This year we went back, and things were almost back to normal, at least until summer came again. I grew up in a remote countryside where you could cycle for hours without seeing a soul. Like many others, I always loved summer. I still do. But since leaving this land to live in a crowded city, summer has lost some of its magic. Everything that made summer special to me is closely tied to the quiet and wildness of the countryside. There is something about the warmth of the wind, the emptiness of the fields, and the smell of the earth and night that makes me feel like I belong to another world. There, I felt a pleasant loneliness, as if I had a small corner of this world to myself. I could disappear for hours. No one knew. No one looked for me. And the summer nights are what I remember most deeply. The darkness made the world shrink, giving way to a feeling of freedom and isolation that the young girl in me once longed for. I was 16 that year. My best friend at the time was Leanne, a girl who was bolder than me, who liked to test her limits with petty risks. One night in July, Like many others, we decided to go out for a bike ride to see the stars. Just the two of us, two bikes, and a bottle of cheap red wine. It wasn't the first time. In fact, it was almost a secret habit of ours until that night. We didn't have a destination in mind, just picked a random direction. Leanne said she knew a great place on the edge of the old town. An abandoned farm, no people, no fences, just grass and sky. It sounded perfect. Around 10 o'clock at night, we set off. I don't remember how long we rode, maybe 20, maybe 30 minutes, until we left all traces of life behind. When we reached a deserted stretch of road, Leanne stopped and said we had arrived. It was pitch black, with no landmarks to identify, just an endless stretch of empty fields. The sky filled with stars. We spread a blanket on the grass, opened a bottle of wine with a small corkscrew that Leanne somehow remembered to bring. The wine wasn't good, but it was enough to warm us up. We laid down, passing the bottle around, occasionally pointing to constellations that we both remembered. The goal was still to find a shooting star. Leanne asked me if I thought I could see one. I just smiled and said it would be difficult, but let's try. Shooting stars weren't that rare here, but we had to be patient. The wine began to take effect, and everything seemed to slow down. Time became meaningless. We were silent for a long time, only hearing the sound of insects and the wind. Then there was a strange moment, as if the night had stopped for a beat. Leanne turned to look at me, her eyes long and deep, enough to make me wonder if there was something more than friendship between us. I had suspected it before, but that night it was so clear that it made my heart beat faster. I didn't ask, nor did I say anything. Where we grew up, such things were not usually spoken of. Maybe I was just drunk or thinking too much. The feeling passed quickly, replaced by laughter as she told some silly story. I looked up just in time to see a streak of white light streak across the night sky. A shooting star. If you ever seen a shooting star streak across the night sky, you know the strange, explosive feeling it brings. It makes you unable to stop yourself from screaming or laughing. That night, in the middle of the vast open field, Elena and I burst into giggles as we saw a streak of light tear through the darkness. She asked me to make a wish. I don't remember what I wished for, probably something random. We leaned back and chatted for a few more minutes. The mood suddenly became lighter and more excited after witnessing that moment. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to feel the night breeze caressing my face and let myself fall into silence. I'm sure I only closed them for less than 5 seconds, but when I opened them again, Elena was gone. Completely gone. No footsteps, no phone light. Even her bike was gone, while mine was still right next to the blanket. I jumped up, thinking she was teasing me, but even though I turned around, there was still no sign of her. A cold chill ran down my spine. The space around me suddenly became stuffy. The stars dimmed, as if someone had covered the sky with a thin layer of cloth. The air also became strangely cold, not like the night wind, but as if I had stepped into another version of this place. I pulled out my phone. 3 a.m. The milestone was engraved in my mind. It had not yet been midnight a few minutes ago. I wondered if I had fallen asleep, but I knew for sure that I had not. I called Elena's name many times, but no one answered. I called her, but no one answered. The feeling of helplessness and fear rose up and made me cry. I climbed onto my bike, trying to stay calm on the way home. The ride was long. Each turn of the wheel felt like a stone. Only when I stopped in front of the gate, out of breath, did I feel my legs shaking. The next morning, I texted Elena, hoping for an explanation. Instead, she asked me word for word, "Where did you go last night?" She said she was the one who woke up alone at 3 a.m., and I was the one who disappeared. She waited for over an hour, then angrily cycled home, thinking I had left. The terrible thing was, we were both convinced we had gone to the same thing, but from opposite sides. No memories filled the void, no text messages, no missed calls, even though we both swore we'd try to contact each other. Our phone logs were blank. We didn't talk about it again, but I knew we were both more scared than we'd let on. For months, I lay staring out the window every night, remembering that night sky. After that, we only looked at the stars once or twice more. Things slowly returned to normal, at least on the outside. But to this day, I still can't explain what happened. I don't believe in ghosts, but everyone who heard the story said it was something unnatural. Maybe they were right. Maybe something had pulled us out of reality for a split second. And I know that somewhere, Elena wonders what exactly happened that summer night in the empty field under the stars. On a hot summer night, two friends, the protagonist and Taylor, lie in a field watching the stars. When a shooting star passes by, they laugh, make wishes, and chat. The protagonist closes her eyes for only a few seconds, but when she opens them, Taylor and her bike are gone. Her phone clock shows 3 a.m., even though it was not yet midnight. Panicking, the protagonist searches everywhere, calls several times to no avail, and then cycles home. The next morning, when they contact each other, Taylor claims that she was the one who was left behind at 3 a.m., while the protagonist has disappeared without a trace. They are both certain that they called each other, but their call logs are completely blank. After that, they never find an answer. They both gradually become silent about it, but the feeling of unease and obsession still lingers. Over the years, they lose contact, but the protagonist believes that Taylor sometimes wonders about the mystery of that summer night. The story ends in a blur. No one knows what happened. Only a cold memory gap remains, and a feeling that both of them have entered a different version of the world in that fateful moment. The story ends here. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.